Welcome to Micro Lecture 1-2 in the Legal and Governance Aspects series. In this micro lecture we will discuss the fact that most of the work that we do is done in organizations. Of course, we are all aware of the fact that organizations exist and we all have experience with how they organize their work. But in order to understand the implications of working in an organization, it's good to first have some ideas of the characteristics of organizations. Once we know some of the basic characteristics, we can better understand what the implications are of working in organizations. Be aware of the fact that this is only a basic introduction to the concept of organization. It's not a full introduction to organizational science or something like that. It's only the basics that are useful for this course. Now, if we look at the basic characteristics of organization, the first one that is important is the fact that organizations hire people. They work for longer periods for the organizations. They get a labor contract with the fact that they have a job, and the implication is that you don't have to think every day where you're going to work because you know you work for the organization. And of course, for the organization, this implies that they have to do the work with a fixed amount of people, at least for the very short time. Of course, you can hire people, you can fire them, but in the short term, the number of people is fixed. Second characteristic that's important is that organizations do their work in different departments. They have specialization of people who do a certain part of the jobs that the entire organization has to do. So the implication might be that you have, for instance, an accounting department, a marketing department, human resources, and other people that do work on the work floor. There is, of course, also the idea that some of the people are not doing the work at the work floor themselves, the operational activities, but they are involved in management and other staff functions. A third implication of the fact that we have organizations is the fact that there is some kind of hierarchy. There's a clear way of taking decisions. Some people are entitled to take decisions for the entire company, for instance the board, but also in the departments you have managers who are responsible for taking certain parts of the decisions regarding the activities of the specific department. One of the implications of the fact that we have hierarchy is that activities are well coordinated within organizations. Because there is unity of command, the organizations have the possibility to make sure that all people that work in the organizations coordinate their activity and do the things in the right way for the organization itself. Now, these departments have their own tasks and their own competences, and connected to that they hire specific expertise. So in the marketing department you will find marketing experts, in the legal department you will find lawyers, and if you are a construction company you will find departments where they have carpenters, plumbers and other construction experts. Organizations also develop standard ways of doing their work. They usually spend some time in finding out what is the best or efficient way of doing the work, and then that is standardized. And these are usually then called standing operational procedures. They might be pretty formalized, for instance in the form of protocols, but it might also be a bit less formal. But at least it's important to understand that they have a fixed way of doing their work. And one of the reasons is that they found out that that is an efficient way of doing the work. Our final characteristic of the organizations that's important is that they develop an organizational culture. They have a specific way of doing things, not necessarily the formal ones or the rules ones that are in the standard operation procedures, but just a standard way of interacting with each other, communicating with each other, and doing their work. Now, you will find that some of this is related to the professions that they hire, the specific professional skills that people have, but it's also dependent on how people are used to doing the work. And one of the things is that people find out is when they get to organizations, when they hire, they will find out that people have a normal way of doing things. And if new people are hired in the organization, this will usually mean that they get to know the ways of doing things, and they are, so to say, socialized in doing the work in that organizational culture. After we discussed the basic characteristics of the organizations, it's time to pay some attention to the consequences of these characteristics. The first one that's really important is that organizations dislike a number of things. They dislike uncertainty, they dislike change, and they dislike to work on problems that are outside of their usual scope. They invested a lot in how they currently do their work. That's how they became efficient. And changing all those things is not what is really beneficial to them. And this is also, of course, linked to the fact that they have fixed expertise, they have fixed personnel, and it's difficult to change that because they would have to hire new personnel, and that involves a lot of costs. The second consequence that is important is that these things don't play only a role at the organizational level, but also at the level of the people who work there, the professionals that work there. The procedures that they're used to, the routines that they have developed, the culture that they have been encapsulated in, they influence their perceptions and their actions. So it's difficult to think outside of their normal way of working. And we can symbolize this by this figure. The last point that is really important is that organizations are so used to doing things within their own organization that it's difficult to work together with other organizations, because these other organizations are used to doing things their own way, and usually that's a little bit different. So inter-organizational or even interdepartmental or cooperation within an organization is difficult. And learning between different organizations is difficult. It's already difficult within the organization. If you have to do that with people that are used to doing work in an entirely different way, that's even more difficult. And one of the major consequences of all of this is that organizations and also departments within organizations, they get interests of their own. They get their own interests. When something has to change, that can be beneficial to them. They can become more important than other organizations, or department within organizations can become more important within the organization. And if something changes, then there might be winners and losers, and this might result in conflict between organizations, and also, of course, within organization between the different departments in the organization. Now, it's perhaps good to look for a specific example to illustrate all this. Think about the idea of youngsters in a larger city who usually get bored in some time of their life, and one of the things that seems to be one of their favorite pastimes is to demolish all kinds of stuff like bus stops or train stops. Now, there will be a couple of organizations involved in working on this. Now, if we think about how they would react, to start with, there is the police, and they are used to making sure that everyone sticks to the rules and stuff like that. So their first idea of how to react to this is, well, they break rules, so let's arrest them, let's punish them, and see that they don't do this again. Of course, then there is the social department. Now, they have a completely different way of working and completely different set of tasks that you usually work on. So their first reaction might be, okay, well, these kids are bored, let's help them. They might have specific problems that they are frustrated with, and that's why they start demolishing all kinds of stuff. So let's try to help them. Then there might be the traffic department. It's their bus stops or their train stops that get demolished. So their idea might be, oh, well, let's give them a different opportunity to meet, so they won't hang out in our places and they won't demolish them. Then there might be the building department. their way of working is the question of, okay, how can we build stuff in a decent way? So their reaction might be, okay, we want to build vandalism proof, make sure that they're not able to destroy all these things. And of course you can imagine if these organizations together have to find a solution of how to treat these problems, then it might become a bit difficult to find something that they all can work on and that they are all agreeing on. So this is, again, just an example of how the fact that organizations are used to working in a certain way, it influences how they look at problems and how they find solutions for certain problems, and they all have their different opinions about it. And cooperation and coordination between these organizations becomes really difficult. Okay, that's it. It's time to summarize this micro lecture. We paid some attention to the basic characteristics of organizations. They have fixed and specialized expertise. They produce stuff in a standard way, and that's how they become efficient. And the main implication of all of this is that they are stuck in a usual way of doing their work. They develop their own interests, and that all makes it difficult to cooperate with other organizations who are used to doing things their own way.